Lecture of Textus Quietats. 5 on a Treasure Island, an extended summary for advanced learners. Instructions. Pass the mouse over the underlined words to view their translation or definition in Catalan. Page 1. An unforeseen holiday and a tense arrival. The narrative commences as the three siblings, Julian, Dick, and Anne, find their customary holiday plans abruptly altered. The prospect of their usual seaside sojourn to Polseath had been unexpectedly foreclosed, leaving them in a state of considerable disappointment. It was their father who proposed an alternative, a stay at Kirrin Cottage, the austere coastal home of their brother, their mercurial Uncle Quinton. Quinton, a preoccupied and reclusive scientist, was a formidable figure whom the children had met only once and held in some trepidation. The arrangement was facilitated by the family's financial straits, as their benevolent Aunt Fanny had conceded that hosting them would provide a welcome, albeit modest, income. Upon their arrival at the ancient stone-built cottage overlooking Kirrin Bay, their initial impressions were mixed. They were greeted with genuine warmth by their Aunt Fanny, whose kindness immediately put them at ease. However, their cousin Georgina was conspicuously absent, having seemingly defied her mother's instruction to welcome them. This initial absence set a tone of mystery. Their encounter with Uncle Quinton did little to assuage their apprehension. He emerged from his study with a distinct frown, his demeanor reinforcing his reputation as a man wholly consumed by his work and intolerant of any disturbance. The children were thus left to navigate a household governed by the conflicting temperaments of their aunt's affability and their uncle's irascibility, all while anticipating the acquaintance of their elusive cousin. The following morning, the enigma of Georgina was resolved. Anne awoke to find her cousin, a girl with strikingly short, boyish hair and a sullen expression, who vehemently insisted on being addressed solely as George. Her disdain for her given name was matched only by her initial hostility towards her cousins, whose presence she regarded as an unwelcome intrusion upon her solitary existence. Page 2. Forging a Fragile Alliance. The nascent relationship between the cousins was fraught with tension. George, fiercely independent and accustomed to her own company, made no secret of her resentment. She was curt and unwelcoming, viewing the siblings as an interference. However, the foundations of a fragile alliance began to form as Julian, Dick, and Anne demonstrated their integrity and trustworthiness, qualities that George prized above all else. The turning point came with the sharing of secrets, a currency that began to bridge the divide between them. The first and most significant revelation was George's clandestine companion, Timothy, a spirited and utterly devoted mongrel dog. Forbidden by her father due to his boisterous and destructive puppyhood, Timothy was being secretly kept for her by a local fisher boy. The siblings' immediate and unconditional affection for the dog resonated deeply with George, signaling that they were kindred spirits. In a reciprocal gesture of trust, George began to divulge the secrets of her own world. She introduced them to her most treasured possession, Kirrin Island, a small rocky outcrop at the mouth of the bay, which she considered her private inheritance. Crowned with the romantic silhouette of a dilapidated castle, the island was her sanctuary. She then recounted the compelling legend of an ancestral shipwreck, a vessel that had belonged to her great-great-great-grandfather. The ship had foundered in a storm just off the coast, its precious cargo of gold ingots vanishing without a trace. This shared knowledge of a secret dog and a lost treasure created a powerful bond, transforming their strained acquaintance into a burgeoning friendship, united by the tantalizing prospect of adventure. Page 3. A Tempest and a Fortuitous Discovery. The story's pivotal moment was precipitated by a tempestuous storm of extraordinary violence. Having solidified their friendship, the children had embarked on a day-long picnic to Kirin Island, a venture that George, despite her misgivings about the ominous weather, had agreed to. The initial hours were idyllic as they explored the ruins of the castle, but the sky soon darkened and the storm broke with a ferocity that was both terrifying and magnificent. Trapped on the island, they sought refuge in a small stone-roofed chamber within the castle walls as the tempest raged around them. The tumultuous sea, agitated by the gale-force winds, churned up the seabed with incredible force. In a dramatic and unforeseen turn of events, the relentless power of the waves dislodged the ancient wreck from its resting place deep beneath the water. The children watched, awestruck, as the dark hulk of the ship was lifted and cast upon a nearby reef of sharp rocks. This fortuitous event rendered the long-lost vessel accessible for the first time in centuries, presenting an unparalleled opportunity for exploration. As soon as the storm began to subside, the newly formed Famous Five rowed out to investigate. Clambering aboard the decaying seaweed-draped vessel, they explored its eerie, waterlogged interior. Their search yielded not the gold, but something of far greater consequence, a small, robust, watertight captain's box, which they managed to retrieve from the captain's cabin. The box was locked, its contents a mystery, and it represented the first tangible clue in their quest for the lost treasure. Page 4. The Map and the Race Against Time. The discovery of the captain's box ignited a feverish excitement among the children. Their attempts to open it were initially thwarted, and their plans were further complicated when Uncle Quinton, dismissing it as a mere curiosity, confiscated it. Through a daring act of stealth, Julian retrieved it from his uncle's study. Upon finally forcing it open, they discovered that its tin lining had impeccably preserved its contents. Inside lay not gold, but a collection of old papers and, most crucially, an ancient map. This document was a detailed plan of Kirin Castle in its former glory, and in the corner of the dungeon layout one word was explicitly marked: ingots. Their triumph, however, was immediately compromised. Uncle Quinton, entirely oblivious to the map's true significance, sold the box and its contents to a visiting antique collector. This single transaction inadvertently alerted unscrupulous parties to the treasure's existence. The children correctly deduced that the buyer, a man of shrewd intelligence, would swiftly decipher the map's meaning and claim the gold for himself. A desperate race against time ensued. Devising a stratagem to beat the villains to the prize, the children persuaded Aunt Fanny to allow them to camp on the island for a few days. They provisioned themselves for a multi-day expedition, armed with their traced copy of the map, and set out a methodical search. Their quest led them from a fortuitous discovery of the castle's old well, unearthed by Timothy while chasing a rabbit, to the unearthing of a concealed stone slab nearby, which masked the entrance to the dungeons below. With their hearts pounding, they lifted the stone and descended the dark, musty steps into the labyrinthine passages beneath the castle. Page 5. Climax, confrontation, and resolution. Having descended into the subterranean maze, the children navigated the echoing passages by marking their path with chalk. They successfully located the specific storeroom indicated on the map, and, after breaking down its stout wooden door, they were met with the sight of the treasure, a large pile of dull yellow-brown gold ingots. Their moment of triumph, however, was brutally cut short. They were ambushed by the very men who had purchased the box, who had followed them to the island. The villains imprisoned Julian and George in the vault with the gold. In a moment of astute thinking, they forced George